Hi everyone, this is Sunny and I will be doing a quick overview about Saturn in Pisces. So more or less what you're going to be expecting, and I know we've been coming in and out of the transit itself, but I thought I might as well just do it for a bit. It's going to be quick, I promise, but if I do sound a little bit mumbly and a little too jargony, I'm sorry. I'm doing this at the top of my head. I'm trying to see what works better for me, whether I write it and then I say it or whether just go with the flow kind of thing. So I'm doing this like that first. Let's see how that kind of goes. So when it comes to Saturn in Pisces, you're going to learn that you're going to be facing your fears and not getting stuck in escapist behavior. More or less, whether it's not always behavior that's like, oh, I like to go out and have fun and drink, or I like to go and, you know, SMOKE, because sometimes the algorithm gets triggered with certain words, but more or less you can also find that certain escapist behaviors that you could have are they seem non-harmful, because I also think Pisces is a sign that's not very harmful. It's not always like indicative of self-destructive behavior. Sometimes it's just passive behavior, like sleeping a lot. It's something mundane like that. Or you could be purchasing a lot of unnecessary items or hoarding things. It's things like that that's just kind of obstructive to your day-to-day life that could be beneficial if you just kind of put a little bit more structure or routine. So that's more or less what you're going to be dealing with. For example, some of these mundane things on the day-to-day, as well as in the big picture, regulations for anybody working in creative industries like actors or musicians, for example. I think it's pretty well known that they have to work certain excessive hours when it comes to their routine, right? So they work excessively to get a project out at a certain deadline that, you know, they were placed in. So sometimes when it comes to these deadlines, they have to work extensively. If you have a 24-hour period in the day, you will notice that they tend to kind of how would I explain, work above maybe 18 hours, for example, and very limited breaks or no breaks at all. Or they just kind of, as soon as they get to finish their, you know, their part in creative process, they have to kind of rest a little bit and then they go back to it again. Or maybe not having a proper lunch break or things like that. So you will notice that well, at least the people that do work in such industries, although we've been noticing that with the SAG protests, and they've gotten some results, but I still see more not fights, but more arguments that could be fixed slowly as the transit passes by. I think you're going to notice more regulations on stuff like that, so that they can have proper lunch breaks, having better pay, or people who are extras having better assistance when it comes to benefits, and so that they don't get, because it's maybe some of them are more risky jobs, they tend to have more, they're not, because maybe they're not the face of the project, they might not have as many benefits as you can think of, as other than maybe like some health, maybe insurances and stuff like that. There's a lot of things that would kind of go into this bubble, right? So not allowing the companies and bosses that are like the big names, to have the profits, and also sharing those profits with the people who also deserve it, the workers. They're the voices, they're the people who make the actual projects themselves shine. So it's a bit of a teamwork, not just like certain people who are picked as favorites, right? And you can also see that creativity would likely increase as well, or at least when it increases, it's like you're being stifled. Maybe because you will be given circumstances that force you to be grounded, forcing you to kind of get your head out of the clouds and kind of focus, like, hey, these bills are coming up, these things need to be worked at. So you can no longer push certain things away because somebody else will step in for you. It's more so that responsibility is put onto you with Saturn in Pisces, and Saturn in Pisces will likely have you be more authentic to what's your situation, right? It feels more like you're not, how could I explain this? Well, let me go back because I kind of lost my train of thought, but more or less it's gonna really get the best of Pisces and the best of Saturn as well, because yes, we can focus on the negativity, but more so how can we make those planets work, because they're not always seeing eye to eye. They don't necessarily have to work against you. Sorry, let me just take a quick water break. But more or less, how can you mingle, how can you mingle these energies that are not usually seen? It's not something that's easy to put Neptune and Saturn together because they're very different dynamics, especially when it comes to, it's like Saturn wants to work and Pisces, well, Neptune itself doesn't mind working, but it works at its flow. So it's like they want to put structure in your flow. So your creativity and your escapist behavior could be stunted because you're forced to be more realistic about things and pragmatic. It's like there's practicality in these transits that you will see for the next 2 or so years. And then putting that aside, I might add notes as I end the video, not the video, but as I post this, by the way, because I always end up adding notes at the end of the video. I always forget to say stuff, but I think we've been seeing the water axis being limited or having increased droughts. I think I've noticed that as well. Increased droughts in areas that were likely not seen, like droughts weren't commonly sometimes seen in certain areas because there's more humidity, they're close to the coastline, or they're close to big water areas, or just areas that are very green, that it's not seen, right? And then you can see that there's limited access to that because there's been weather changes, so the weather's been a little fickle, a little more restrictive as Saturn is, and more than likely the areas that sorry, I didn't want to cough in front, but sorry. The areas that were not that were more dry, they have gotten more water, more rain, more storms, for example. These are just some minor manifestations that are pretty obvious. I don't feel like I'm making anything a revolutionary discovery. I'm just kind of pointing out the obvious things, right? Something you might also see is that, oh, I forgot to mention earlier when I was talking about career things, something you might see is the fact that you would likely see an increase in the manifestation of creative careers as your main source of income as opposed to a side gig. So people that have in the past had to work a more traditional work job are gonna be likely having this open space of having the opportunity to involve themselves in their side interest that was giving them some sort of revenue, and likely that revenue lasting them a good while, enough for them to actually get by. So you could see that switch from going to like having the traditional job to nine to five, what we typically call it as, to having careers that basically allow you to work on your own time, on your own flow. It doesn't mean you're gonna work less. I suspect you're gonna probably work more, because I think it's a running joke that I've seen in videos where it's like, work for yourself. You can choose the pace you want, and it's like you end up working like most of the day because you just haven't put quite the limiting time frame for yourself. It's a funny way of explaining, but more or less I see that being more common. And also the creative jobs, I think, are gonna likely take more time, but I don't feel that it's gonna be sucking the life out of you in that sense, where I feel like your creative juices will be flowing, and it's a light workflow, I feel, because you're doing something that you love, but it is work, so it is something that you have to consider, right? some likely procedures. And you would likely not have to work to the bone, right? Like, but I do feel you're going to be working more. Saturn is a planet where, despite the fact that it's in Pisces and Neptune, and it's watery, it's creative, it's fun, it's still a planet that likes restrictions, it likes obstacles, it likes authority, it likes to put those boundaries, and especially in Neptune, which is no boundaries, which is kind of funny. It'll be interesting, but I think it might help you give yourself some sense of direction, by the way. You could also notice that people are putting the spotlight on religious and spiritual spokesmen, leaders, recruiters with unfair amount of power and bringing them to justice. You can see that. I think you can see that more or less. I don't want to point certain things because sometimes the algorithm's going to work against me if I say the things that I want to say, but you know, people who are in certain groups, let's just put it, spiritual groups, that can lead people to be deceived, let's just say that. But you can kind of get the word. I'm trying to go with a CULT kind of word. Those kinds of things. And people putting them in the spotlight of like, oh, this person's here, like also trying to recruit people or trying to get away with things because they could afford it, because the group itself has the income for it and the connections to cover up their indiscrepancies. I think you might say that word a lot better than I do, but I can't say that word. Indiscrepancies. I can't say it. So anyway, moving on. Putting more protective laws on those who are weak or without a voice, like animal rights. I know everyone else. When it comes to voices speaking up, that people no longer are interested in, like animal testing, for example, in makeup products or products that have to go on the body, like medical procedures, right? Or even substitution of food, although that's still kind of tourist related, but that's separate. But it's still related, you know, in the sense of like wanting to be kind to others and show sympathy, empathy, kindness, right? Compassion. But these are just some examples. Again, I don't feel that none of this is really that revolutionary, but you know, sometimes you kind of need a little bit of sense to make sense of the transit, just to point out the obvious things, right? So again, exposing creeps who prey on individuals younger than the age of 18, let's say, you know where I'm trying to get that, and assigning them proper sentencing. That's also something I can hypothetically see happening, more so because it's something that's already in motion, something that people have been kind of not hinting at, but collecting data, collecting evidence, finally putting it up to the public eye and, you know, the justice system. But I do see it will take a lot for this to happen. So I do see I do see action being executed, but it's going to be slow action. Saturn is really slow. It's a slow transit. It's slow procedures. It's like little by little by little, finally getting the big result you want. It's just waiting a lot, being responsible, being effective, and being, how can I say, able to wait for your big reward. The reward where you get the justice, you get the karma you deserve. Whether it's good or bad, you will get the karma in that Piscean nature, because that is what Saturn brings. So it's not, I mean, you can also think of this as a Saturn return for some, but it will be like a slow transit where you will start to see these things go into effect, but maybe likely after the transit and many years to come, maybe not always right away. And it's obvious mostly because Saturn is super restrictive, and Saturn kind of gives you the lesson, but just because you learn the lesson doesn't mean that you will feel good right away. It's something that you're going to have to kind of work with, and it's something you can't really push down with that Pisces placement, but more so it's something that you kind of have to navigate carefully, and likely the best way to navigate your conflicting emotions is through creative endeavors with Pisces. I think that's the best way to say it, is that creativity that's relying, on yourself, being more practical, pragmatic, being realistic, and wow, well, I want to say a word, not authentic, but you being the person to take authority over your life is something that you're going to learn to do in the big picture, in the small picture, and you're going to learn to navigate it really well if you learn to merge these two energies, that one's free forming and the other one's more restrictive. So how can you make these work? How can you put restriction in a place where there's no restriction? The boundaries are endless, and allowing that strong Saturnian energy to relax but still have it's like you want to moderate those energies. It's like not too little, not too much. I always think of, like, is it the Goldilocks and the Three Bears? It's like with the oatmeal. The oatmeal is really hot, one's really cold, and then you finally go into the middle and you have the perfect blend of a moderate temperature. So that's what I have for you. This is gonna be, I thought it was gonna be quicker. I'm sorry, I thought it was gonna be 6 minutes, but it's fine. So thank y'all for listening, and have a wonderful day, and I hope you guys are enjoying my videos. So bye bye everybody.